Do your tunes look like this? Well, if so, I'm gonna show you how you can turn your tunes from this into something like this. Let us begin. I will be using the 993 Carrera RS for this tutorial and hopefully be able to teach you how to effectively tune cars for style and competitiveness. Here is a showcase of the car with max power upgrades but stock tuning settings. Notice how 4th and 5th gear ratios are short but 6th is longer. And how I hit my top speed on this section before I get to the corner. These gears are not optimal and need to be retuned to fit the car and the track. So let's do that. Here on the right side of the tuning menu are two graphs. The top one shows our turbo horsepower and torque stats, which is not as important as the graph on the bottom. This one shows our gear ratios. As you can see, the stock ratios form the letter R, which is not super optimal gears and can be tuned better. The formula I like to follow is as shown: 3, 2, 1.45, 1.12, 0.91, and 0.76. This makes the gear ratios look more normal and therefore feel much better to drive with. However, this still isn't enough, as we now need to tune the final drive. Tuning this will push all our gears forward or backward, producing either faster acceleration or higher top speed. And because we are on a highway map, we need more speed, which means pushing our final drive backward to give us more speed. Now let's test out the new gearing ratios. Since we extended them out as well as extending our final drive, it takes longer to hit red line and have to change gear, meaning we can get more out from our gears. We also don't top out at the super fast section and can instead continue gaining speed through this part, making us faster. Now that gears are done, let's move on to steering. Steering aggressiveness determines how fast you'll hit full steering lock. Here we can see the differences between the minimum default and maximum steering aggressions. See that 10% steering aggression means our wheels are turning way too slow to make any corners, whereas 225% steering aggression means we hit maximum steering almost instantly, allowing us to make corners more quickly. Steering ratio is how much degree the wheels can physically turn. Here we can see that despite the 10:1 ratio having a much larger wheel angle than the rest, it produces the most amount of understeer of the lot. This might be because the wheels are turning too much, hindering the car's ability to steer at all. This corner is a good example. Notice that the car is struggling to turn through this corner and eventually hits the wall. Then, because of the large angle, the car starts rapidly turning left and right, causing me to spin out. Another thing with this ratio is when you take off and turn at the same time, you literally can't because the wheels are basically at a 90-degree angle, causing the car to be unable to turn and accelerate. Safe to say that 10:1 steering ratio is terrible and you should stick to the default of 22:1 and just turn up the aggressiveness to whatever fits your style. Brakes are very important when it comes to racing, and tuning them to fit your track and play style is even more important. Brake bias is the distribution of braking force in the front and rear brakes. Higher brake bias puts more force on the front brakes, which decreases brake distance but also decreasing rotation when braking. Lower brake bias puts more force on the rear brakes, increasing brake distance but also increasing rotation when braking. As we saw from that experiment, putting too much force on one area of the car's brakes can cause the brakes to nullify. 100% bias makes the car take a very long time to brake, and 0% bias does the same, but because of extra rotation it starts swerving left and right. Here is a more normal comparison. 45% to 55% brake bias. This better shows the difference between a higher and lower front brake bias. The higher brake bias stopped faster than the other two, and the lower brake bias took longer to slow down. Another thing about brakes is this thing called ABS, which stands for anti-lock braking system. This stops the brakes from locking up the wheels and allowing the driver to maintain steering control without skidding. Disabling ABS will cause our car's wheels to lock up and cause our car to spin, just like this. Which is not cool. So if your car has a flashing ABS symbol when braking, that means your car has ABS. If the symbol never goes away, it means your car does not have ABS. Also, some cars that don't have ABS or are lightweight tend to spin out with large braking forces, so sometimes going with lower stage brakes or even stock ones may be better than the maximum stage 3 level of brakes. The best thing to do is test each brake stage to see if your car can handle that stage. However, most cars can handle stage 3 brakes, so you should be fine nonetheless, but check anyway. Fitment is the width of the car's wheels. Negative fitment pushes the tires closer together and gives the car a narrower track, whereas positive fitment pushes the tires further out and gives the car a wider track. Negative fitment gives the driver more feedback when the car is reaching its limit before it starts skidding. The car begins to slide around, letting you know that the car is about to skid. Positive fitment doesn't provide this feedback and therefore the skid comes suddenly, which makes it harder to prevent. However, the positive side to this is the car is able to be pushed more to its limit before it starts to skid, meaning you can get more out of your car when you widen its track. Fitment is all personal preference, but the best thing to do is have it so the tires line up with the car's fenders, making it look nicer, especially with wide body kits on. Ride height determines how high the car sits above the ground. Lowering the ride height means the car is closer to the ground. Whereas raising it has the opposite effect. Lowering the ride height makes the car look nicer because yes, camber is the amount of tilt the wheels have on the car. Negative camber tilts the wheels inward, allowing for better handling and grip when the car takes a corner. Unfortunately, this impacts straight line speed, meaning you won't go as fast if you had no camber. Spring stiffness determines the stiffness of each spring. A higher spring stiffness means the springs are stiffer and do not compress as easily, which may cause a bumpy and unpleasant ride when driving across bumps in roads. A lower spring stiffness means the springs are softer and will compress a lot more. However, making them too soft will also cause a bumpy and unpleasant ride. Spring stiffness can also determine the amount of oversteer or understeer your car has. Making your rear springs softer than the front springs will give the car more understeer. Good for powerful rear-wheel drive cars that like to oversteer during cornering. Making your rear springs stiffer than the front springs will give the car more oversteer. Good for either front-wheel drive cars or all-wheel drives, especially on town races like Ichikawa or Mount Otsuki. Damping is the process of controlling and absorbing the energy of the springs to prevent excessive bouncing and ensure a smooth, stable ride. Tuning the damping changes how our car reacts when cornering. At the lowest of 50 damping, we can see the car wiggle and shake when cornering. However, at the maximum of 500 damping, this wiggle is removed entirely and our car doesn't roll or bounce as much when cornering. And that's the end. Hopefully you are now filled with enough knowledge to be able to tune your own cars and set competitive lap times on the grid. Another tip I can give you is to browse the MRT Discord server for tunes other people have made, as you can learn from them by comparing your tune to theirs to see the differences. Thanks for watching and have fun tuning. Goodbye.